What if I told you that one of Germany's most decisive players at the 2026 FIFA World Cup was not someone who had been predicted to become a star since childhood? And what if the player who is now making the football world talk about him once worked in a factory before eventually standing on the biggest stage in world football? When the 2026 World Cup began, almost all of the attention surrounding Germany was focused on the bigger names. There was Jamal Musiala, viewed as the next golden generation talent. There was Kai Havertz, already proven at the highest level. And there were several young players expected to become the new faces of German football. But as the tournament progressed, I started noticing one name quietly stealing the spotlight from all of them: Deniz Undav. At first, I didn't pay much attention to him either, but every time Germany needed a spark, every time a match started drifting into dangerous territory, and every time the pressure intensified, the same name kept appearing. That's when I started asking myself, is Deniz Undav actually more than just a substitute? Could he be Germany's secret weapon and one of their most important players at the 2026 World Cup? In today's video, I'm going to talk about Deniz Undav's incredible journey and inspirational story on the road to the 2026 World Cup. Let's get started. A player who was never expected to reach this point. When I look at Deniz Undav's career path, it feels very different from that of most German national team players. He was not a product of an elite academy who had been projected to become a global superstar from a young age. He was not labeled a wonder kid, nor was he valued at tens of millions of euros as a teenager. Instead, Undav had to take the long road. He played at levels that attracted little attention, moved from club to club, and built his reputation step by step. Even while many players his age were already competing in Europe's elite leagues, Undav was still fighting his way through the lower tiers of German football. That's why when his name appeared in Germany's squad for the 2026 World Cup, many people saw him as little more than a squad player. What makes his story even more remarkable is the fact that Undav once worked in a factory while continuing to chase his dream of becoming a professional footballer. While other players his age enjoyed the benefits of major academies and media attention, he lived a far more modest life. There were no guarantees of success, no shortcuts. Every step had to be earned. That's why when I see him scoring goals on the World Cup stage today, it feels like watching someone who simply refused to give up on his dream. From former factory worker to German international, stories like this are incredibly rare in modern football. Why Nagelsmann continues to trust him despite not being a regular starter. One of the questions I have seen most often throughout the 2026 World Cup is why Deniz Undav is not always in the starting lineup. It's a fair question, especially considering how much impact he continues to make whenever he plays. However, the more I studied Julian Nagelsmann's thinking, the more I realized that Germany's coach sees Undav differently from most people. To Nagelsmann, Undav is not just an additional striker, he is a tactical weapon designed for specific moments. Some players are needed to control a match from the start, others are needed to maintain balance, and then there are players who are meant to break open games when everything becomes stuck. That is the category where Undav belongs. I began to understand the logic when watching Germany's matches. Undav is not the type of striker who needs dozens of touches to influence a game. In fact, it's often the opposite. The fewer chances he receives, the more valuable each touch becomes. When opposing defenders begin to tire, when spaces start opening up, and when matches enter their most tense moments, he seems to possess a unique ability to find opportunities that others cannot see. That is why Nagelsmann appears more comfortable using him as a secret weapon rather than a regular starter. The decision continues to spark debate, but so far, its effectiveness is difficult to argue against. The match against Ivory Coast changed everything. If I had to choose one game that completely changed the way the world views Deniz Undav, my answer would be Germany's match against Ivory Coast. Before that game, he was still considered a useful backup player. Yes, he had already made important contributions, but not enough to truly capture the attention of the international football audience. Germany was under significant pressure. Their play was not flowing as expected. Ivory Coast remained disciplined, and time was running out. Usually, these are the moments when established superstars take over, but this time, something different happened. The moment Undav entered the pitch, the rhythm of the game changed dramatically. Then came the moment that made headlines around the world. His 2 goals not only secured Germany's victory, but also transformed his public image. Suddenly, media outlets were discussing him everywhere. Pundits started asking why a player this effective wasn't starting matches. Fans began searching for information about who Deniz Undav really was and how his career journey had brought him to this stage. What impressed me most wasn't simply the number of goals, it was the way he scored them. Everything looked simple, quick, and ruthlessly efficient. There were no unnecessary movements, just the instincts of a striker who knows exactly what to do when an opportunity appears. After that, the debate surrounding Undav grew even bigger. Following the match against Ivory Coast, I started noticing something fascinating. The debate about Deniz Undav was no longer limited to German media. The discussion spread across multiple countries. Many pundits began questioning whether Germany had underestimated one of their most valuable assets. Some argued that Undav had already proven he deserved a starting role because his contributions were more tangible than several players receiving more minutes. Their argument was simple. Football is ultimately decided by goals, and Undav continues to provide goals whenever Germany needs them most. However, I also noticed another group with a completely different perspective. They argued that Undav's success is actually a result of his current role. According to them, not every important player needs to start matches. Some players provide their greatest value during specific phases of a game, and Undav belongs in that category. The debate became increasingly interesting because both sides had valid arguments. On one hand, his statistics and impact are difficult to ignore. On the other hand, Germany's overall system continues to function effectively. That is what transformed Deniz Undav from a squad player into one of the most fascinating stories of the 2026 World Cup. Undav's story is bigger than goals and statistics. The more I follow Deniz Undav's journey during this tournament, the more I feel that his story is much bigger than the number of goals he scores. The World Cup is usually associated with players who have been famous since their teenage years. We are accustomed to seeing footballers who were destined for greatness from a very young age. But Undav offers a different narrative. He proves that there's another path to the top, a path that is longer, harder, and far lonelier. He did not arrive at the World Cup as a major star. He arrived as a player who still had to prove himself every single time he stepped onto the pitch. Perhaps that is why so many people are connecting with his story. When Undav scores, people are not just watching a good finish, they are witnessing the journey of a former factory worker who once seemed incredibly far away from elite football. They are watching a player who was never the first choice, but kept forcing people to notice him through his performances. And if there's one thing I've learned from Deniz Undav's World Cup story, it's that sometimes the most dangerous players are not the most famous ones. Sometimes the most dangerous players are the ones who have been underestimated for far too long. As the decisive stages of the 2026 World Cup approach, one thing has become increasingly clear to me. Deniz Undav is no longer just a backup option in Germany's squad. He has evolved into a symbol of efficiency, perseverance, and self-belief. Every time he steps onto the field, there is a feeling that something might happen. And not many players in this tournament can create that kind of expectation. What makes his story even more compelling is the fact that the debate surrounding him is still unresolved. Should he remain Germany's super sub, or is it finally time for Germany to place their full trust in him from the opening whistle? Whatever the answer may be, one fact is impossible to deny. From former factory worker to Germany's hero at the 2026 World Cup, Deniz Undav has captured the attention of the football world. So, what do you think? Has Julian Nagelsmann made a mistake by not making Deniz Undav a regular starter? Or has Undav's success actually come because he's being used as Germany's secret weapon from the bench? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, because the further Germany advances at the 2026 World Cup, the bigger the debate will become about the player nobody expected to be at the center of attention. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel.